How many of you think that there are enough leaders today, or do we need more? More. Do we need more leaders in the architecture industry? Yes, because as what I understand, what I liked about this course is that I got to learn more about architecture than I ever have. And what they told me was that there are people who are trying to take over some of your roles and some of your duties and some of your responsibilities. Will it take leadership to maintain your profession as you know it? Will it take leadership to adapt your profession to what the future holds? Are your people prepared? There's one interesting question, right? Well, we got 9 people up here who were very, very good. All right? We have Mary, Jennifer, Erica, Zach, Rhonda, who am I missing? Carrie, and Adam. Did I get everybody? I think I did. We had Jen, Jennifer, and Jen, right? They were some of the best students that I've had. I spent my last 4 years at the FBI Academy. I served as an adjunct professor of leadership and ethics for the University of Virginia. So I had students from all over the world, and the 9 that we had in this program were fantastic. So what we're going to do here is it's going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to do all the talking. What I'm going to try to do is show you a little bit of what we went through in our JLI leadership course, have you experience it, and then in the latter half, we're going to talk about some different things about leadership, some of the stuff that we didn't cover but are valuable to each and every one of us. Does that sound good? My goal, I got 3 goals for you, okay? 1, I want you to learn a few things. Does that sound good? 2, I want you to think. I know it's early in the morning, but I know that I see a couple of you have coffee. That helps, right? 3rd, I want you to have fun. So that's my combination for today. Right now, what I want you to do is I want you to come up with your definition of leadership. Just think of something real quick. All right? Can somebody volunteer their definition? What is it? Proactive. Okay, what else? The person points the way. What else? What is it? Tenacity. Visionary. Takes care of their flock. Enabling a team to do their best. We got a couple more. These 2 right here. Go ahead. Influence. One who clears the path. Go ahead. One. Inspire. Listen. How to motivate. Listen.
Person who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way.
Knows the way, goes the way, shows the way. Last one. Consensus builder. Now, were any of these definitions exactly the same? No. Why? If we look at Webster's dictionary, we can find a definition of leadership, but yet each and every one of you had a little different twist on the definition. Why do you think that's so? Different styles. Okay? Different styles. Different strengths. Different goals, different leaders. Different contexts, different situations. Is there a universal way to lead? No. Okay, so now, do you agree with the statement that leadership means different things to different people? Okay, so we agree with that. Now, how many of you are leaders? Whose definition is the most important? Mine.
The one who carries the biggest stick.
The one who carries the biggest stick is the most important. Right? Let's think about that for a second. Okay? How many of you, if you thought of the best leader you ever had? Okay? I want you to do 2 things. I want you to think of the best leader that you've ever had in your career. Okay? Everybody got a face? Think of the worst leader you ever had in your career. Everybody got a few faces for that, right? Right? So now, the best leader, the worst leader in your life, each of them give you the same task. Which one is going to get the better work product out of you? The best. Why? Motivation, trust, respect. Right? The best leader has made a connection with you. What we studied in our class was something called transformational leadership. If you look at the research and the statistics, transformational leadership is the most effective form of leadership. And basically, if I boil it down to one thing, transformational leadership is the ability to connect to those around you. That best leader, how many of you did not want to disappoint him or her? Right? The worst leader, did you care whether you disappointed him or her, or were you simply trying to do just enough to make sure that you didn't get in trouble? Right? You see the difference between the two? So now let's think about that a little bit further. Your definition of leadership, is it the most important? Or is it possible that the person you lead's definition is more important than yours? And I ask you this. There's an old movie out there called Old School with Will Ferrell. Remember Old School? All right. Those of you who haven't seen the movie, it's a story about three guys who get kicked out of their house. They move into another house that's right on a college campus. It's part of fraternity row. They think they're in their middle-aged man's dream. Okay? One scene in the movie, Will Ferrell's walking through the kitchen, and they offer him to bong a beer. And he's an adult, and he says, no, I'm going to pass. But then they talk him into it, and he says, just one. How many of you can have just one beer? If we go back last night, how many of you had just one beer? Right? So he ends up getting 1, 2, 3, and gets a little bit drunk. The next scene in the movie, it shows Will Ferrell naked, and he asks everybody in the crowd to go streaking. Next scene shows Will Ferrell running down the street naked. How many people were with him? 0. So if you choose to be the leader and no one follows you, are you a leader? Or are you just simply walking down the street naked? Right? So now let's go to our workforce, the people that we lead, whether it be personal, whether it be organizational, whether it be in a different culture. If you don't know their definition of leadership, because you've told me that leadership is different to everyone. If you don't know what your people's definition is of what they want, what they expect out of a leader, how are you ever going to be able to lead them? And that takes a connection, right? We talk about all these little things. I can teach you all the things. You can read all the books about things to do as a leader, but it all comes down to the little things that you do. I spent 25 years in the FBI, so I have a lot of police stories, but here's one that I think applies to everybody, no matter what organization you're in. In the police world, we have to work on holidays, including Christmas, right? Who usually gets assigned the Christmas shifts? The rookie, right? The rookie, because they've got no time on. Now, who is most likely to have young children at home? The rookie, right? So there was a little sheriff in Indiana, and his kids had grown. Every Christmas, he would show up at 6 a.m. roll call in his uniform with his vest on. He would pick 2 of his officers, and he told both of them, go home today. I got your shift. And he would tell them, you're going to get paid, but I want you to go home. And he'd pick 2 of them that had young children ages 5 and 6, because at that time, Christmas is magical. And he says, go home. I got you covered. What are the chances that they ever forget what he did for them? Right? And if I asked those 2 officers, or the officers from the previous year, if I asked them, would you run through a wall for that guy? What would they say? Absolutely. It's these little things that you do that makes you, takes you, catapults you into this transformational leadership stage. We're going to talk about a couple things that are barriers to that, but it is all about establishing a connection. John Wooden, Teddy Roosevelt, I think John Wooden stole this from Teddy Roosevelt. It's a quote. He says, no one cares until they know how much you care. Is that important to leadership? The best leader you ever had, did they care about you? Did they take the time to listen to you and have a conversation with you? If you were down, were they there to pick you up? Did you feel like they had your back if something went wrong? Whereas contrast that with the worst leader you ever had. Did you feel like they had your back? That's transformational leadership. That's where people feel a connection to you. And instead of just being an employee, just being an acquaintance, I'm a friend. And that means all the difference in the world to leadership. Okay? So we also focused on the brain. There's a book out there called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Okay? It's a really, really, really thick book. But it's got some good stuff in it. And one of the things he talks about is System 1 and System 2. So I like to use this exercise to kind of explain how the brain works. How many of you, well, let's say this. Anybody from Illinois? All right, I'm from Illinois. What part of Illinois? Northern or southern? Central, okay. Central, Danville, okay. I'm from down by Carbondale. So you can relate to this, and everybody else, just imagine this. You're driving down the road, 30, 40 miles an hour. You're having a good time. As you come around a corner, there's a deer in the middle of the road. What do? Slam on the brakes, swerve. In Illinois, what do? No, we square up the car first. We square it up just right, and then we hit the gas, we hit him, and then we just put that deer on top of the car. Right? Because that's good eating. Right? Kahneman calls that System 1 because when you see that deer in the road, did you think about what you were going to do, or did you just automatically react and go to the brakes? Right? That's System 1, your reactionary brain. How many of you have bought a car before? What are some of the things that you thought of before you bought the car? Money, right? What else? Which was it? Prestige. Performance, right? Gas mileage, all this other stuff. And then you negotiated with the car salesman, didn't you? That's what Kahneman calls System 2. That is your rational thinking brain. My buying a car is System 1. Does anybody know why? It's reactionary. Why?
You're a guy.
I'm a guy, yeah. She's absolutely right. And we'll talk about differences between guys and girls in just a minute. But she's right. It's System 1 for me because all I have to do is I look at my wife and I say, what do you want? Whatever she says is what we get, right? If you see my wife around, you'll see her this weekend, you'll see I'm married above my level and I want to keep her, so whatever makes her happy, I'm all in. Right? So now, System 1, reactionary brain. System 2, your rational thinking brain. Which one do you spend more time in? Today, last week, next week, pick any day, any hour. Do you spend more time in System 1 or System 2? How many say System 1, your reactionary brain? How many say System 2? How many of you won't raise your hand no matter what I say? All right, so to prove the point, I will ask you the easiest question of all. Just go ahead and blurt out the answer as soon as you know it. It's for a purpose, trust me. How many of each animal did Moses take on the ark? How many of you said 2? Why is that incorrect? Nope. Who said that? It was Noah, not Moses. Right? So you win a copy of Eat More Ice Cream. Here you are. You're welcome. So what happened to you all here was you saw System 1 dominate. Because Noah, Moses associated with the Bible, before you can think about it, you say 2. That is System 1. 95% of the decisions you make every day are made with System 1. System 1 was why I had a career in the FBI for 25 years. Because no one plans on stealing a lot of money, right? Everybody that I had arrested, there was always one thing they always said, I planned on paying everybody back. I'm like, yeah, but you owe $128 million. Yeah, but I still plan on paying everybody back. So System 1 dominates, and it leads to certain conclusions, such as this right here. Oh, what color is that dress on the left? How many of you say blue and black? How many of you say white and gold? How can it be white and gold when it's clearly blue and black, right? What about the shoe on the right? What color? Teal and gray. How many of you say teal and gray? How many of you see pink and white? Huh? Pink? To me, that is plain as day, pink and white. Right? To other people, it's plain as day, teal and gray. Now comes the really interesting test. Tell me what you hear.
Laurel, laurel, laurel.
I'll play it for you one more time.
Laurel, laurel, laurel.
How many of you heard Yanny? How many of you heard Laurel? How can that happen?
I heard none of those.
What'd you hear?
I heard Mary.
You heard Mary. That's the first time I've ever got married, but it's still good. So how can we all look at the same picture and see something completely different? How can we all hear the same recording and hear something completely different? What do you think's happening? Right brain, left brain perception, right? And what happens is I can answer the two pictures. The ears, I can't really answer. But the pictures, as you look, if you're looking at me right now, what you see is a big black hole here in the middle. Your eyes take in everything, it sends a message to your brain. So what happens here is some of the people see the white and gold and they fill it in. Other people see blue and black. Same with the shoe. Now, I have almost lost all my hearing in this ear, so I went to an audiologist one time, and she asked me, says, any other questions about your ears? I said, yeah, explain this Yanny Laurel thing. And she says, I can't explain that, right? But what it teaches us in leadership is that how many times has something appeared obvious to you, but yet someone else doesn't see it? And as a leader, how many times do you think that you have the best idea for the situation, and yet somebody sees it completely different than you and may have a better idea? Can you recall a situation in your life where as you look back on things, you start to wonder, it's like, why did I make that decision? Right? My wife was just saying that to me the other day. She says, why did I say I do? You know? But luckily it's been 26 years, so it's too late for her to get out. Right? But what happens is as leaders, if we keep ourselves open to different ideas, to different perspectives, and what happens is I see the dress as blue and black. And if I discount anybody who says white and gold, then am I discounting their opinion? And then what happens as a leader, if they tell me that dress is white and gold, I'm like, that's blue and black. What are you talking about? What's the chances that they offer me another idea? And that idea may be something that saves my firm a lot of money or a lot of pain because I was willing to listen. Somebody mentioned the definition of leadership. Is listening important to leadership? It's extremely important. We're going to talk about listening a little bit more when we get to power. Okay? Because believe it or not, if you're a leader, if you're in the supervisor position, your brain starts to work against you. Okay? Let's go a couple other things. We talked about employee evaluations. How do you answer this question here? All of it. Why? Coming from perception, different people have different biases, right? The answer is B. The answer is B. 62% of an employee evaluation is based on your biases. As you look at the people, as you rate them, you cannot help but get yourself into the process, right? And so somebody does something a completely different way, and we look at it and say, I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have done it this way, so therefore they're wrong. Is that good leadership? No. What would happen is if you looked at somebody and you asked them, said, why did you choose to go that path? A manager in California company, he took a leadership class of mine, and he calls me about 3 weeks later. And he says, Brett, I got to tell you this story. He says, I had a new guy on my squad. He said, I was teaching him how to do things. And I hear your voice in my head, and it says, let them fail. Because I'm a big believer in letting people fail. How many of you told your kids not to touch the hot stove? Right? And they did it anyway, didn't they? Right? But they learned and they never did it again. Right? So I tell people in regards to failure, let them fail unless it's going to be catastrophic or somebody's going to get hurt. Because those are the lessons that you never forget. So he says, I'm watching him, and your voice is in my head. And he's like, let him fail. And he says, it's hard for him because he's really active. And he's like, I want to stop it. And he says, I watched him do step 1, step 2. And I'm like, yep. Step 3, he takes the step I figure. And then here we go. He says, 2 more steps, failure. He says, step 4, he takes a direction I didn't think about. And then he takes step 5. Ends up, he creates a whole new process, which is much shorter and much efficient than the normal process they had. What would have happened if he stopped him? Right? Just because people don't do it your way doesn't mean it's the wrong way. How many of you have learned something new in the last week? Should we ever stop trying to learn? If we cut people off sometimes, are we stopping our learning as well as theirs? Right? So we learned in evaluations, let them fail. Don't try to make, just because they do something different than you, it doesn't mean that they're wrong. Okay? Because your biases, your lens, your perspective is going to get in the way of what you see as correct. We talked about autonomy, purpose, and skill. What you said, I think earlier, whoever has the biggest stick. Which is more effective, the carrot or the stick? Carrot. How many of you say the carrot is more effective? How many of you say the stick?
Nobody wants to admit to it.
Nobody wants to admit to it, right? I do a thing, and one of the questions I asked the students was, when necessary, which is more effective, or which would you rather use, the carrot or the stick? What does everybody choose? Everybody chooses the carrot. Because is it much nicer to give a carrot than it is to use a stick? Right? But if you look deep down psychologically, who is that all about? You. And if you do not hold your team accountable, what happens? Right. You get the stick eventually. Right? Because somebody above you sees that you're not holding them accountable. But would it surprise you that if I told you neither the carrot nor the stick are very effective at all? Right? And I used to work in government. What happens when you run out of carrots? Right? You go back to the stick. Eventually, and I've been to Thailand. I've been to 66 countries. One of the countries I went to was Thailand. And I watched the couple Thai people train an elephant, and it broke my heart. Because how do they train the elephant? With a stick. They beat it. Right? If you get beat after so many times, what do? You just break. You just do it. Right? If you read a book called Drive by Daniel Pink, he says these are the top 3 motivators today. It's not a carrot, it's not a stick. It's autonomy. Give me the idea. And I'm a classic Generation X, which is those born 1965, 1980. Anybody in that range? All right, tell me if this matches you. I go to work, I want my boss, tell me what the goal is, and then let me figure out how to get there. Right? That's autonomy. If you look at that, engagement in organizations that allow people autonomy goes through the roof. Goes through the roof. I want to figure it out. I'm smart enough. I think it was Steve Jobs who used to say, like, I'm hiring the best people in the world. Why am I going to tell them what to do? Right? Purpose. Tie in what I'm doing into the greater good. Why am I spending all this time on this project? It says, is there a purpose for me to do this? Even if it's a mundane task, why is this necessary? As a leader, are you telling people, if you don't do this task, then the building cannot stand? The building will fall. Even if it's the most routine, boring task that you have, does that give me a purpose? Right. And the last thing he says is, give them a chance to perfect that skill. Make me good at something. When you first started out in architecture, were you very good? But as you learned, did you get a lot better? Right. The FBI, we went through a 4-month academy, and we get out, and the first agent, I'm assigned a training agent, he looks at me and says, okay, all that stuff you learned in the academy, forget about it. I'm going to teach you the real thing. Right? And I learned. And eventually I became somewhat decent, right? That's what people are looking for. If you want to motivate them, give them the chance to figure it out on their own. Tell them why this task is important, and then let them perfect their skills to where they become quite good at what they're doing. That's what motivates people, okay? Now, are there differences between people? Yes. Are there differences between genders? Do men see the world differently than women do? Do women see the world differently than men do? Absolutely. Here's a video to show you exactly how some men see the world and how some women see the world.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's gonna stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just...
Don't.
Try to see things my way. Don't have to keep.
So there are differences between men and women, aren't there? If you want that one, you can go to YouTube and find It's Not About the Nail. All right? So that's kind of a basic summary of what we did in the course. Now, there's obviously a lot more stuff, and I wanted to add some new stuff in because I've got my wonderful graduates in the room. So I want to add some new stuff in. And so now we're going to talk about some more things I think that can help you in your organization as you go forward, okay? First one is, what do you think about this? Now, I will tell you, I do another exercise. I didn't do it in this class, but I do it in another one, where I put letters in each corner, A, B, C, and D. And I tell all the students in the room, I said, read this question and then go to the corner which best represents you. A would be the top 10% of leaders. If I got 100 people in the room, how many go there? 99. Usually we get some humility here. Hey, not with architects. Normally I get like 2 to 3 because I'm really in the 10%, but I'm going to go in the top 25 just not to show off, right? So I get 2 to 3 people there. The top 25% will have 50 people. The top 50% will have 40 people. So that leaves me about, we'll get to 97. And the bottom 50% has at most 3. Does the math add up? Because if we're in a room of 100 people, how many should be in that bottom 50% corner? 50%. What this is called is illusory superiority. And what it says, we tend to rate ourselves more favorably than others, right? More favorably than others. Are you above average in intelligence? Of course, you're architects, right? It takes smarts to become an architect. That's why I'm an accountant. Right? Take smarts. Are you above average in generosity? Of course, right? And then guys, are you an above average driver? Every single guy raises his hand. You betcha I am, right? Right? This is illusory superiority. It's that we overrate ourselves and our abilities. Can this be dangerous to leadership? Yes, it can. I'll show you some more ways in just a minute. We also want to talk about power. Okay? Here's one of the things that really surprised me, and the science behind it is just amazing. How many of you consider yourself to be servant leaders? And a servant leader is basically a leader who goes in and who says that I plan on serving the needs of my followers. Okay? How many of you put your followers first? Okay? Good, good, good. How many of you drive a Lexus, Mercedes-Benz, or something like that? Oh, you're like saying, why? Why does he want to know that? Right? Because it coincides with power. All right? Studies show that power goes to your head in ways that you do not recognize. They did a study of people driving cars. And so as you come to a stop sign, they send a little old lady walking across the street at the stop sign. If you're driving a Lexus or Mercedes-Benz, what are you more likely to do? Help her across the street as you bump her with the car? You are less likely to stop and let her pass than if you were driving a Camry or something like that. Right? I got a bagel up here because it's one of my favorite stories ever. A guy was a successful trader on the New York Stock Exchange. Made all kinds of money, but never could handle the stress. And so he decided, I'm going to drop out of the stock trading business and I'm going to open up my dream business, which is a bagel company out of Baltimore, Maryland. Now, I question his dream business is a bagel company because he's getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning making bagels. Here's what he does. He gets up every morning with him and his family. They make all the bagels. They put them in trays in a van, and then they drive to different offices throughout the region. And they leave a tray of bagels with a coffee can, and it's an honor system. You pay for your bagels and cream cheese. There's nobody watching you. End of the day, come back around, pick up the leftover bagels and the money in the coffee can. He kept meticulous records. There was one building that drew a lot of attention for them because they had 3 floors. On the first floor, what employees are on the first floor? Frontline people, right? Who's on the second floor? Middle managers, right? Who's on the third floor? Executives. The first floor, what was their rate of honesty between 0 and 100%? Basically, how many people paid for the bagels and the cream cheese they ate? At least 92%. Okay? Middle managers. 50, 60. Man, you guys got a bad perspective of middle managers, right? Man, and I see a couple of middle managers in here and say, no. 80%. 80%. Top floor. 30. No, it's actually 62. 62%. But as you look at it, which has the most monetary means to pay for the bagels? Top floor. Why don't they? Entitlement. Entitlement. Does that happen to you? How many in your career, how many people have you known that have been great, great people until they started moving up in the organization? Right? What happens to your brain is that you get used to people serving you. And the example I use is from the FBI Academy. I worked the FBI Academy from 2012 to 2016, my final 4 years in the FBI. I was the lowest ranked agent in the academy, right? So I shared a bullpen room with 10 other agents, and we had 2 printers, okay? If our printer broke, we had to call the computer helpline. What would the people on the end of the computer helpline tell me when I said the printer was broken? Oh, reboot. Yeah, plug it in. Yes. Put paper in it. Make sure there's ink, right? Once we got through all that stuff, they'd say, all right, we'll get to you. About 2 weeks. Right? 2 weeks. And that was generous, because usually it took about 3 or 4. If I'm the head of the academy, the number 1 person there, and I call and I say my printer is broken, what do they say to me? I'll be right there. 5 minutes later, they're there fixing it. Now, in fairness, if I were to ask the head of the academy, is there a problem with the IT response time? What is he or she going to say? No, they come right away. What happens if you as a leader don't go down to the front lines and see what's going on? Are people going to serve you? In fact, I had a good friend of mine, his cousin becomes the CEO of a mid-sized company out in the West Coast. He had a mentor all throughout his career. And the mentor calls him up the first day he takes the position of CEO. Calls him up, and he says, "Congratulations, you finally made it to the top." He says, "Thank you." Then the mentor says this, you tell me what you think. "Welcome to the first day of no one ever telling you the truth." Why is that? Why don't CEOs get to hear the truth? You tell them what you want to hear, right? And how many CEOs want to hear bad news? Right? But, as I say, there's a thing called psychological safety, which is your followers' ability to come to you with problems that you maybe don't want to hear. If you work out and you're going to the gym, let's say you lead by fear and intimidation. Remember that leader you had who led by fear and intimidation? You go to the gym, you take off your shirt, you're getting ready, a couple of your followers in the room, and they see this little bump on your back. And it's not normal. What's the chances they tell you about it? Zero. 6 months later, you're in the gym, you're taking off your shirt, you look back, now you got a hunchback. Right? When the problem is small, can you fix it? When the problem is large, can you fix that? If you don't have psychological safety and people don't tell you about these things, how will you ever know what you need to fix? When somebody tells you something that you don't want to hear, you should celebrate it. Right? Celebrate the fact that they're telling you something that you need to hear, but no one wants to tell you. In fact, the FBI, we had a big saying, small cases, small problems. Big cases, big problems. No cases, no problems. Right? So you got to do what I do and keep myself in power is I have a ground wire. My ground wire is something that you all know. It's called Facebook. Anybody on Facebook? Anybody hate Facebook like I do? I'll tell you up front, I don't care what you had for dinner last night. I don't need to see a picture of it. Right? But I'm on Facebook for 2 reasons. I'm 52 now. I want to find out which one of my high school friends are dying because they're starting to die. And the second is for leadership. Because Facebook, I call Facebook my ground wire. Because Facebook is where all my high school friends are, and they know where all the bones are buried. So if I start feeling a little bit too full of myself, I go on Facebook and I insult one of them. What happens after that? Oh yeah, here it comes. Even the people that I didn't insult. Oh, you think that was dumb? Remember when you did this? And I'm like, okay. That's a way to keep myself grounded. Find yourself a way to keep yourself connected to the lower levels. That will maintain your empathy. Because as you move up, you're going to lose the ability to empathize with others. It's a natural process of the brain that you can't stop unless you take steps to go after it. Okay. We also have the fundamental attribution error, which is best characterized as this quote. Why is it that we judge ourselves on our intentions and everyone else on their actions? You're driving up Interstate 4, you're with your family, everybody's happy, and somebody cuts you off. What do you do then? Everybody loves Raymond. They had an episode like this. They asked the grandfather, Frank, they said, hey, what would you do? And he says, I want to be right on their butts so that when they look in their rearview mirror, they can read my lips. How many of you want them to read your lips? Right? Now, you're on Interstate 4, you're driving along, you're happy, and you look in your rearview mirrors, everything's good. You go over to the right and you hear the honk. You just cut somebody off. What do you do now? My bad. My bad. What's the difference between the two? That's the fundamental attribution error. You knew when you cut somebody off that it was a mistake. When somebody cuts you off, you think it was intentional, right? The fundamental attribution error says that when somebody does something bad or mean to us, we automatically associate it with their personality. That person's a jerk. Whereas when we do it, we have a situational cause. The mirror didn't work, right? It was in my blind spot. Is that fair? No. As leaders, can we afford to do that? What should we do? When someone makes an egregious mistake at work, should we ask them, what led you to make that decision? But how often do we go to like, oh, you were just stupid. Why were you so stupid? Right? Do people intend to be stupid? Maybe some. Right? But for the most part, they don't. As leaders, are we quick to judge instead of finding out what is the basis for that decision? And then in fact, there was a guy from J.P. Morgan who once said, he gets promoted to a hedge fund, and he gets $15 million to trade. The timing for him is horrible because the week after he gets the hedge fund, the stock market crashes. He loses $8 million. The bosses call him in. What do you think when the boss calls you in? You're in trouble. He thinks the same thing. And so he's coming in, and he walks in, he sits down across from the boss, and he says this, I understand if you're going to fire me. What does the boss say? He says, yeah, you're fired. No. He says, fire you? I just spent $8 million training you. Now, what do you think about that perspective? What do you think about that follower and that leader? And you know, if I think architects in Florida are the same as anywhere else. How quickly do stories spread in the AIA? Right? Quickly, right? Anytime somebody got promoted in the FBI, what I call the FBI's Pineapple Express started. Because then we started calling everybody we knew who may have dealt with this individual to find out whether or not he or she is a good person. Right? Same thing here. If you treat an employee like that, what's the chances that the word spreads? And what does it do to your leadership credibility? Right? Are people going to make mistakes? Yes, they are. How you react to them is going to tell a lot about whether you are a transformational leader or not. Right? Should people be fired for mistakes? Absolutely. But should there be an understanding why? Right? Now, I will openly say that I am terribly conflicted by former FBI Director Jim Comey. He's in the press all the time now. But I will tell you this, one of the things that I do love about that guy is that when he made a decision, he sent out an email to all the agents explaining why he made the decision. It was only 2 or 3 paragraphs, but why is that important for leadership? What? Transparency, right? And it stops me from making up a story. Because when you as a leader make a decision, you say, all right, here's what we're doing from here forward. And that's all you say. What do I start doing? Speculating. I construct my own story that fits my personal desires. Is it accurate? Normally not. But can it take off like wildfire and become the accepted truth? If you go to Ferguson, Missouri, Michael Brown, hands up, don't shoot. It has been definitively proved that Michael Brown did not have his hands up when he was shot. But the story took hold. If you take the time to explain it, and it can be a pain in the butt to do so, but if you take the time to explain it, what happens is people don't create a story to fit what they want. They look at you and they say, I don't agree with that. But at least then they have your basis, and they don't make up stories. Okay? What's the biggest barrier to leadership today? Anybody know? Ego. What? Apathy. Communication in the form of? Hey, I'm talking to John here. How you doing, John? Let's connect a little bit. Let's talk. Let's get to know each other. Oh, excuse me. Hold on. I got a page. Oh, yeah. Okay, huh? Am I connecting to him? No. What becomes the most important thing? My mother-in-law, we can be sitting at dinner, and as soon as this starts beeping, what does she do? She'd be like, hey, Brett, how you doing today? Beep, beep, beep. Oh, I got to go with this. What becomes the most important thing? What does it tell me as a follower? Not very important, right? Now, here's an interesting study for you. People were brought in to give a general intelligence test. They were asked to leave their phone outside turned off. How did they do on the test? Average. Now, they were also allowed to bring the phone in and put it in their backpack or their purse, whatever they had. How do they do then? Poor. Below average. When they were asked to turn it off and put it on their desk, how do they do? The worst of all. My daughter's introduced me to something called FOMO, fear of missing out. Right? When you have that cell phone near you, you are automatically thinking about, oh, what if somebody's paging me? What if somebody's calling me? Does that take your focus and attention away? Absolutely, because focus is important. So now, how can you ever expect a follower to trust you if you first don't extend trust to them? Right? And if you're not focused on them, how are you going to deal with that? Here's a couple things we learned in the FBI. Active listening principles. When you're talking to somebody, as they're talking to you, follow along, nod your head, right? Open-ended questions. Let them narrate what you want. Say, hey, what happened? Now, be careful. We had an FBI agent who always started every story with, on the first day, God created the universe. We always say, hey, speed up to this point and then tell me what happened, right? Then reflecting and mirroring. What that means is that I'm going to do whatever you do in front of me. So if you're sitting in front of me like this, I'm doing this as well. If you're nodding your head as you're talking, I'm doing the same. These are the techniques we use. Emotional labeling. If somebody's angry and they come into the room and says, you sound angry. Why is that? The I message, which is the second one on the right, what that does is it takes the emotion out and puts it on you. It seems to me that you sound angry. What that does, it takes the third-party view and allows them to step out of their anger just a little bit. Pauses and silence are very effective, right? How many of you had somebody tell an emotional story and they have a period of quiet? And then are you uncomfortable with that quiet, or do you let it go? Because they may be gathering enough strength to continue that story, right? Lastly, summarize periodically. Say, all right, so I've got this so far. Am I tracking you right? Am I following you right? These are principles that can help you connect, okay? But it's hard, because focus is a scarce resource. Believe it or not, System 2 is like your cell phone. The more you use it, the lower your battery becomes. But here's the best news I'll give you all day. How do you reboot System 2? Chocolate, sugar, donuts, all that good stuff, right? The problem is 3 to 4 hours after that, you're going to crash pretty hard, right? But these are the things. If you take a break, if you have an important meeting where you really want to focus somebody, give yourself 5 minutes before you start and just sit there and relax. Don't focus on anything. Just listen to music, whatever. That will increase your focus that you need to connect with the other ones. Okay? All right, just a few more things. I like to use these presidents. I've got 2 books out there. The first one, Eat More Ice Cream. The second one's Get Off Your Horse. This one's about presidents. So I've got stories about presidents. All right? Abraham Lincoln was told, or he actually got in trouble by his cabinet because he kept leaving the White House during the Civil War. Why did he leave the White House all the time?
Go to the front lines.
He went to the front lines. Why was that important? To connect. Walk around with your people. Go connect with them. Washington chopped down the apple tree and told the truth. Accountability is extremely important.
Cherry tree.
Cherry tree. I used to always say apple, cherry tree. Cherry tree. Thank you for correcting me. No, see, I get confused like that, right?
It's a fruit, right?
It's a fruit, same thing. Kennedy, after the Bay of Pigs invasion, told his brother Robert, he says, your job from here on is to figure out what position I have and then argue the exact opposite even if I don't believe it. That was to get that different perspective, right? Those are all important things to leadership. The last thing I want to leave you with is the ice cream, okay? My first book is titled Eat More Ice Cream. There's a reason for that. How many of you work too much? Right? Had a conversation with a guy in class, and he said, we were talking about work-life balance because I had a guy in a survey tell me it's been 10 years since he had taken a vacation with his wife. Yeah. And he was still married. Shows how nice that wife was. And so he's telling me this, and we're talking about, spending time with your family, not missing things. And a student says, you know what, I'm going to disagree with you. Said, because I worked all these details, I missed recitals, I missed plays, I missed games, but it's all worth it now because they're going to this great college. And so I asked him, I said, all right, let's put your daughters in these 2 chairs, which are empty right next to you. And let me ask him, would you rather have your dad at the game or would you rather go to the better college? He started crying. At that time, my wife comes home, she was working for a judge, and her judge, he's having a difficult time. She thought he was going crazy. How many of you take some kind of medication? Do you ever read the side effects? He didn't either. But it was causing his brain to swell. And I think it was like within 3 or 4 days, if he didn't get it fixed, he probably would have died or suffered real damage because the brain was literally pressing against the skull. And it made us enter into a conversation. And she asked me, she said, you know, if you were at the end of life, what would you wish you would have done more of? Now, guys, what's the proper answer to that question? Spend more time with your wife. But I would took it a little bit further. The first thing was like, I changed it. What would you say? Because I want to find out what she says first before I answer. And she's skinny as can be, and she says, well, I wish I would have eaten more ice cream because there's so many flavors out there I haven't tried. Right? So what that became for us is that eat more ice cream is a metaphor for doing all the things that you want to do before it's too late. I read another book, and the book quoted a book written by a hospice nurse. And she had 5 things that people regret the most when they're dying. I remember 3 of them. The first one was, I wish I would have worked less. Right? That's pretty easy. Second one, I wish I would have been the person that I wanted to be instead of the person that everybody else wanted me to be. And finally, I think this one really ties to leadership. I wish I would have been happier because I now realize that happiness is a choice. Right? Leadership, work, all this stuff gets in your way. How many of you have ever been in a bad mood? Right? But in the end, when you look back at your career, I go back to the first day of the FBI. I'm a young accountant. I'm 24 years old, just turned 24. I'm in with all these law enforcement people. And the old scruffy guy walks in, and he starts yelling at us. He says, 4 months from now, you're going to walk across the stage, you're going to get an FBI badge, you're going to get an FBI identification with your picture on it, you're going to go out and you're going to show it to somebody, and as you show it to them, they're going to give you all this amount of respect, none of which you have earned. And then he says, your job for the next 20 years, which is 20 years before we were eligible to retire, he says, your job for the next 20 years is to leave the place better than you found it. When you get done with your career, the things you're going to look at is, have you made an impact in other people's lives? That's what it comes down to. That's what leadership is. My definition of leadership is way too simple, but it's people. Without people, you can't lead. And without taking the time to connect to them, you are never going to reach your leadership potential. And with your organizations, with the state of the world today, do we need connection and do we need leaders? That's up to you. All right? I'm on LinkedIn. I have business cards up here. I also have 1 copy of Get Off Your Horse that I'll give away to the first person who can come up here and show me a credit card or driver's license that has the number 32 on it. I got some books out there. I'll do a book signing if anybody wants it. So thank you very much, everybody. Hope you enjoyed and hope you had fun.